Okay, so we're in our sketchbook again, and this time we're going to be discussing form. And the element of form is when you're talking about something that's 3D. So let's go ahead and write that. It's 3D, so it's got length, it's got width, but it also has depth. It goes back. So if you look at these forms that are drawn out, they kind of have the illusion of it being 3D. 3D is when you're working in ceramics and you make something in the round that you can see all the way around it. It's not just something that's flat that you see from the front. It's typically something that you can look around the entire thing in the round. With this class is a 2D class, so we won't be building any sculptures, but what we will be doing is creating the illusion of form, like this right here. It looks like a box. You could imagine it being 3D sitting on a table. So that's what we're going to practice. So in your book, you're going to need your pencil with an eraser and your blending stump. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to be using value and shading to copy exactly what you see here over here. If you look very closely, there is just barely a light little drawing so that it kind of gets you started, so you don't have to worry about proportion. It's already kind of roughed out for you. So when I look at this, of course this is the lightest part, and it's got a few little dots on there so that it's not totally white. So I don't want to leave this totally white. I'll just very, very lightly holding my pencil way back by the eraser, I'm just barely putting any graphite down on the paper at all, just barely at all. I'm going to take my blending stump, rub it around in little circles to kind of smooth that graphite out so that it's one value, getting rid of all those little lines. You can probably barely even see that. That's okay. Then what I'm going to do is this section, so it's a little bit darker, so I'm going to press down a little bit more. I'm going to try my best to stay inside the lines. Just kind of fill it in lightly. And do the same thing with my blending stump. I'm going to take it, trying to stay inside that shape and smooth it out. And notice as I do that, it gets darker. Okay, and then lastly, as far as the form is concerned, I'm going to fill this section in. That's going to be my darkest area. It's really the darkest out of the whole thing. So I'm really going to put some pressure down on that. Going to find my edges. Kind of connect those a little bit. I'm going to slow down so that I can stay right inside that shape. Same thing up here. I'm going to slow down so I can get that right. And then I can go faster as I fill in the middle part. When I get to the edges, I slow down a little bit so that I have a little bit more control so I don't have to erase so much. Right? Same thing with my blending stump. I am filling that in. But right now, if I leave it like this, it just kind of looks like a floating box. We want to make it look like it's sitting down on a surface, which is why we have this shadow. It's a cast shadow. It's a shadow that's been cast onto a surface, table or floor, however you want to look at it. So this is the only shape you're really going to have to make up. It comes off the corner here, kind of straight across. Okay, and then it angles up. Now look, this line is parallel to this line and this line, pretty much. It's not exact, but it's pretty close. So what I'm going to try to do is match this angle as best as I can, about like that. And then notice that the back of the shadow is actually, it's not from this corner, it goes back behind here. So it's somewhere between a third and halfway up this back edge of my box. So I'm going to go ahead and connect that. Notice that this shape is lighter than this, but it's darker than that. So that's one thing I want you to start practicing, is seeing your different tones, your different values. So I'm going to make it lighter than this, but darker than that side. But remember, when I start to blend it with my blending stump, it is going to get a little bit darker. So I'm starting to wonder if maybe I went a little too dark, but we will see in just a second. Let's see. Because you need to have some kind of contrast between these two, or they blend in together and you lose that sense of depth and that difference between the two. So I'm going to darken this a little bit because I can do that. Right. Since this is so light and the background's so light, you kind of lose the sense of where that edge is. So I'm going to give it kind of a background where I'm going to darken it here and kind of fade out. Darken it here and fade out. And that way you really get the sense of the whole box. I'm going to just use my blending stump to pull that background out. And I'm just going to use what's on my blending stump to just kind of fade that out so it's not so much just in this area. It looks like it kind of goes around the whole form. Okay. And as I do that, I can see I should probably darken it here just a little bit, and then maybe I can darken this here. You're looking for contrast. You want those edges to stand out. Okay. So when you look at it, it looks like it could be a 3D box sitting on the floor on a table. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing with each one of these. I want you to pay attention to how dark an area is, how it blends across to a really light area. Pay attention to the cast shadow, how dark or light that is compared to this side or that side, and then also filling in kind of a haze around it, like a little bit of a background. I'm going to go ahead and speed this up, but I'm going to continue to work on this and videotape it so that you have a reference, so that when you look at yours and you're wondering if you're doing it right, you can just look at mine and compare the two. Okay, so one thing that I want you to notice as I'm working a circle, or when I'm drawing a sphere, you don't want to go up and down and have straight lines. You want your lines to be round with the form. Here on the sides of all of these other forms that I had, the cube, the cone, the cylinder, those lines were straight. So a lot of those lines, as I was filling them in, I went straight up and down. With the sphere, it's a little bit different. It's round, so you want to have your lines follow the form, or it just is not going to look right. Okay, so next we're going to flip over to texture. Now, there's two different kinds of texture. There's actual texture, and that is what something what something really feels like. Like the pencil is hard. The eraser could be squishy or kind of soft. The table is slick. It's how it really feels, actually touching things. What we're going to be using is a simulated or implied texture, and that's how something looks like it feels. So just like on this page where we were creating the illusion of form, the illusion of something that's 3D, over here texture is the simulated or implied texture is the illusion of how something feels. So like if you were to draw grass, you can come in here, this is a kind of texture where you could imagine that being, or it almost kind of looks like hair too. You could imagine what that would feel like. Or let's see what other kind of textures. Looking back at these look very smooth. That we blended smoothly, so it makes it look like it has a smooth surface. It's not bumpy or it's not prickly or anything. It looks very smooth. So when we're drawing, we're going to be creating the illusion of texture.